Hello and welcome to Finding Your Collaborative Edge, the podcast for leaders, teams and professionals who want to unlock the full potential of collaboration in their organisations and lives. Hosted by me, Anni Townend and Lucy Kidd, together with our guests we explore what it means to truly collaborate through the guests' insights and experiences of finding their own collaborative edge, where more is possible together than alone. In this episode, we're delighted to be in conversation with Karen Dobres and Trev Davies. Karen is author of Pitch Invasion, which she describes as documenting her journey from football-shunning feminist to board director at Lewes Football Club. Trev is commissioning editor and publisher for Cassell at Octopus Publishing Group and publisher of Pitch Invasion. The title of our conversation is Whose Book Is It Anyway? A very warm welcome to you, Karen and Trev. And thank you, Trevor, for our merchandise.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us. It's so exciting to be here. Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming in. We're really looking forward to our conversation together and to hearing about your experience of working together and collaborating together to create the book. Before we do, we'd love to hear a little bit about who you are as individuals, as people. So our first question for you is, tell us something about who you are and what really matters to you as a person, and then we'll get into your experience together.
I was thinking about, collaboration and everything, and I think I'm quite an easygoing person, really. I'm quite happy to coast. Then I get angry about something, and then I become full of myself, get a massive ego, and I just want things done my way. So I feel like, in terms of a person, I've got both things. Honestly, sometimes I'm just so happy to just do what other people want to do, take the easy route, anything for peace. And then sometimes I get a real bee in my bonnet and I become, I think, and some people might agree, that I become a little bit tricky to deal with. Is that what you sort of meant by as a person? Because that's what I've been thinking about because of our wonderful topic.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's brilliant to have that insight into yourself and as a warm-up into our conversation, so we can come into that and hear your experience, Trevor, of that trickiness and also that calmness and generosity that I hear is there on both parts.
Such a lovely way with words, Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you. Trevor, how about for you?
Yeah, well, for me, in my job, you have lots of different subject areas you have to cover, and I love that. And it makes you a very inquisitive person, and it makes you kind of understanding because you have to listen to the people you work with because you're not the expert. They are. Quite often it's their story rather than necessarily just their expertise as well. And you kind of learn through that. So I could be doing, say, Karen's book at one point and then be on a photo shoot training puppies on the next thing. And I have no expertise in that, but I have my expertise in my own field. But I love learning. I love it. It's just like being a sort of professional magpie. You just nab little bits of the things you like, and it makes you a pub quiz bore. But it's a lovely thing to do. So certainly professionally, that is what I really value.
What we're hearing is that curiosity to find out and to explore and to learn about people and what they're doing, but also about their story, because everyone's got a story. Yeah. And often what we're helping create is the space to bring that story and to bring it in to how people can work together and do their best work together. So, yeah, it's great to hear that.
So let's hear your story of collaborating together. Where did it all start? How did it start? And, how have you manage that relationship?
So I was writing a book and I had an agent, lovely Nick. When we got the book proposal together, so when you write a book, you need a sort of marketing document, really, that tells publishers what the book's about, little synopsis, kind of chapter headings, who you think the book's aimed at, that kind of thing. That took quite a while because it felt more challenging than actually writing the book, because the book, just as it's a bit of a memoir, it just sort of poured out, you know. So when that was ready, Nick sent that to a variety of publishers. Trev was one of the publishers that got back to Nick, and we had a meeting, didn't we? We had an initial sort of Zoom meeting, sort of about sales, really, like who was the book for, and realised we were in the same ballpark about that. God, I keep accidentally making ball analogies. I don't mean to. And
so ingrained in you now.
I don't know what's going on. Yeah, so we had that meeting on Zoom, and that's when we started collaborating, because I realised, because I didn't know anything about publishing, and actually I think Trev and I have that curiosity in common. I'm really interested in how it all works now. You know, it's really interesting. And he said he had to sort of present to the sales department, you know, about the book, and then we'd sort of hear back. And I think there were a couple of other publishers that were a little bit interested as well. Anyway, Trev got back to Nick and said, "Oh, you know, we're interested. We want to offer a contract." I think that's how it started. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, because obviously you're on the kind of pitching to me. It's a weird thing, is because you have to pitch to pitch to an author. Yet the author's sort of pitching to you at the same time, so you get it's a really strange.
Whose pitch is it anyway? It's all about the pitch.
So pitches. We're back on the football thing, and then you have to sell to your salespeople as well. So if you get a passion for it, it's not just a passion. You have to, you know, do some research and identify your markets and all those sort of serious, boring things. But I knew a tinsy bit about the Lewes story, just a smallest bit. I knew a little bit about Equity FC and the paying the women the same as the men. So it was in the back of my head, so that when the proposal came through, I thought, oh, hang on. Yeah. This is something good. We can do something. I can envision where this is going. But you get that quite often with manuscripts that come through, and you think, oh, that's good. But there's quite a lot involved with the person who's written it as well. When I bring in publicity and marketing to meet authors, it's quite often because I'm enthused about the book and the person, and I want them to meet this person and get involved with the story. And once they do, then it's not just the collaboration between myself and the author, it's the collaboration between the publishing team and the author. And that makes it really, really quite a strong bond, because they're not just looking at a title on a spreadsheet, they're thinking of Karen. Yeah, they're thinking of the person and her passion and her story. And also the other thing is, you know, it's a story about Karen in a man's world, and you know, publishing is a woman's world. Actually, it's 75% our company, so immediately they can identify with it as well, and it was very motivating. And I thought, oh well, this is excellent. This is perfect for us, because we have a remit to publish these stories, and that comes from on high. We have to get stories out there to voices that perhaps wouldn't have had those publications 20 years ago, and project that message as well.
And what was it especially about Karen that made you want to get to know her and to work with her?
I think it was the activism, but also, in the nicest positive way, Karen will do a lot for the book. I don't mean to be, but you were doing anything for the book. Yeah. So, to sell the book, and that's really important. Like, so when you're looking from a publisher's point of view, you're looking at the person. You might be looking at their platform. They might be a social media star or whatever. That's all great, but are they really connected to their audience? Can they reach their audience? After the hard yards of writing a book is done and it's published, and you've gone through all the legal questions and the copy editor questions and all that boring stuff, have they got tired of it? You just knew with Karen she wouldn't, because you could see it in the book that she'd done all this. She didn't care. She just would throw herself at it, and that's what we liked. So that's and for to have that as an author is really refreshing sometimes. It doesn't always happen.
You know, I'm on a mission, really. That's what it is, isn't it? Like, and it's funny because, like, in our last meeting that we had, I realised there was a real parallel between what I did at Lewes FC and selling the book, which is that what I was really trying to do at Lewes Football Club, I came to football via gender equality, right? So that's a bit of a weird route to start with. And what I was trying to do was platform women behaving in a different way to how women are normally portrayed. So they were the women's footballers breaking stereotypes, being strong, being aggressive, being in a space that is really a male bastion, you know, taking up that space in public and shouting and kicking a ball. I mean, I'm so inspired by women's football for those reasons, because they break stereotypes, and it's really refreshing, to use Trev's word again. I wanted to make this more normal. I wanted other women that didn't necessarily like football because it had never been marketed to them, because actually they didn't know that women's football had been banned and that women had actually been bullied out of football. I wanted them to come and watch women's football. And that was how I wanted to raise the crowds for the women footballers and justify, you know, equal pay. So with the book, what I'm actually trying to do as well is reach women who don't necessarily follow football as football fans and get them to read this book, because it talks about being in an exclusive environment and how you manage yourself within that. It talks about how it feels to be like that, to be in that situation. And it talks about my own, you know, anger and passion, but also I had a lot of fun. It was a ride, you know, what I did at Lewes FC. So because I'm on a mission, this is, you know, there's a reason for this. This isn't fiction. This is like gentle activism in a way. And I'm here for it. And every time, and I have lots of opportunities at the moment and lots of times at the moment, where a story comes up in the news about women and girls being treated badly, you know, my hackles rise and I think, what can I personally do about this? And really, it's promote my book, which is lucky. But do you know what? Do you see what I mean? It's like there's so much motivation for me all the time, and to promote women's football more generally, and more specifically to promote what Lewes FC are doing with equality and moving forward, you know, with Lewes FC. And it's a journey in investing in the women's team particularly. So it all, you know, to me, that is so motivating that I get over my ego, really, which would stop me putting myself forward. As Trev says, I'll go to the opening of an envelope if it means I can promote women's football. Do you know what I mean? I have to be sometimes a bit more discriminatory, I think, but I will do anything if it's within my, you know, time, diary, power, capacity to do it. I will do it.
Even though, yes, our main audience and the target are obviously female readers, I would love more men to read this.
Yes.
Absolutely love it, because when I was reading it, first of all, I suddenly realised one of the beautiful elements of it is you didn't care about football. You didn't care about men's football at all. You did not have football baggage. You weren't handed a club down by your father or your brother or you know, you didn't have anything that was all the negative elements that actually, you know, a lot of positive things would come, many positive things that come with supporting a football club, but there are some lot of negative tribalism and aggression and negative energy in supporting a club. You had none of that. I would like a lot more men to read that and suddenly realise and step back and think, actually, is what I'm doing, supporting my football club, the right way of supporting my football club? And is it just a men's football club?
A lot of men have said it's refreshing to see it with new eyes. And it's so funny because my dad, who doesn't like football, you know, he's read the book and he's a bit old school, you know, he's 86 now. And he read the book and he said well, it's feminism, but it's not in your face feminism. I like it, you know, because he's a bit worried about feminists and me being a feminist. But he actually, you know, he was interested in football through the book. He was interested in feminism through the book, and he found it very engaging. And so that warmed my heart. A lot of men who are football fans are, as Trev says, quite steeped, you know, in the culture of it.
Yeah.
And I came to it with very new eyes and through a different lens and thought, you know, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? Luckily enough, I had the position in the club to be able to make changes freely and for a while. And it was great. It was great fun. It was really great fun. Yeah.
There's a lovely bit where you're learning how to chant.
Yes.
It's like you couldn't have done it before.
No, I've never done it before, you know, learning how to chant and, you know, and actually an example of Trev and I collaborating, because he obviously does know a lot about football. I remember like there was a part of the book at the beginning where I was saying, you know, I didn't know anything about divots, which for the uninitiated are the little holes that you put the goal posts in, you know, the endless discussions about things like that on the board, you know, or I was talking about things that I didn't know about, and I needed another thing, and he said Christmas tree formations, right, which is brilliant, and so I wrote Christmas tree formations in that bit because he was giving me, you know, little ideas. But these are the things that to someone who's a football fan this will be a second nature, you know, second language. But to someone coming in at it that's a football virgin like me and many of the people I brought into football, it's alienating. You know, and it's kind of things that you have to think about if you really want to be inclusive and welcome people to a football club. And something Trev just said now is what is the purpose of a football club? Mm. Now, coming back to that, do you want to just be grumpy old terrace grumblers? Or do you actually want to, you know, create community and, you know, be a bit more positive about what these 11 people are doing on the pitch?
I think that's very true. Yeah. I think we've forgotten with Premier League clubs and whatnot, we've forgotten they originated because of community.
Yeah.
That's why they were there. And that's what the brilliant thing about Pitch Evasion is it just reminds you that. It just takes you back to the fact, actually, this is a community club and one a community can have pride in. And you get obsessed with, I don't know, transfers and how you're doing in certain things. And you forget that. Yeah, you get a little bit alienated from the really core concept of what a club is, and it's supposed to bring communities together and make them feel proud.
And it challenges, doesn't it? It challenges the concept, I think, the book, of community to be how a community can be exclusive and or inclusive. And you mentioned activism and you positive activism. And I think that when I read the book and revisited it, and I'm inspired by you, Karen, and the book, that it's a book for everyone to read about what it means to have a voice and to have a passion and to be on a mission and to take other people with you, whether you're into football or not, whether you're into feminism or not, you know, which is why I recommend the book to men and women to read, irrespective of whether they're interested in football or not, because it's such a powerful message around belonging, around feeling excluded, around bringing people with you and how to do that.
I always think unity is a really interesting, you know, in terms of collaboration, actually, like achieving unity and all having the same mission, all getting behind the same purpose is a way of getting things done, as well as, you know, hopefully scoring some goals. It's literally unity is what it is about.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing about Karen's approach to this sort of positive disruption, even though you didn't quite know you were sort of disrupting, you're just going about your own way, wasn't it? It was very inspiring in a business point of view. In like you get so ingrained in the norms that you forget to question them sometimes, and you sort of get narrowed into doing the same things.
It's really great to hear Trevor say that he'd actually heard of Lewes FC and the equality campaign even before he saw the book proposal. So something was working, you know, about what we were doing. Disruption serves a business purpose for sure. It speaks to people who might not normally, you know, pick up a book or come to a football match.
That was the thing that really caught my attention, and I am not someone who's knowledgeable about football or is particularly inspired by it, and have started to be by reading your story about it. What particularly I'd like to explore more with you is that whole idea of coming outside in, that I think you talk about it, of outsider value, and realising that there are things that are happening, that have been happening for a very, very long time, and people have almost stopped paying attention to them. you talk about the women at Lewes, some of them weren't upset, weren't angry about what was happening,
Yes, yes.
about what the conditions were. And you, the word that stood out to me, you felt agog, that how can they be experiencing these things and not feeling anything about them?
Yeah,
and it's so
yeah.
often, we see this in organisations and in culture, organisational culture. It's the way things have always been done, and we
Yeah.
accept it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's acceptable. And often it takes somebody from the outside coming in with fresh perspectives, fresh experience of it, to question it and to get really curious about it, but to also be really courageous about naming it and asking bigger questions about, well, should this be happening, and is there a different way for this to be happening, and agitating and provoking that exploration of something that's happened for a long time.
Yes. So I was agog with the women footballers, and I'll talk about that in a second. But what is really important to say, the first people to do that were two men on the board, and one, Ed Ramsden, shout out to him, he'll probably never listen, but so at Lewes FC, directors were elected to the board, and he wrote an election address, a re-election address, which cited a story about fish. And like there were two little fish swimming in one direction and an older fish swimming in the other direction. And the older fish says to the little fish, "How's the water today, boys?" And they kind of look confused and they all swim along. And the two little fish say to each other, "What water?" Right? And this was Ed's metaphor for sexism in football, really. He was talking about how women's matches weren't reported on in newspapers, how they weren't on the telly, how we didn't market to women's matches, you know, how we put all the budget towards the men's team and not the women's, etc., etc. And this was all so normal. Nobody questioned it. You know, and he cited figures of, you know, the BBC saying, you know, all the action from the weekend, and it was all men's matches, as if no women's matches had been played at all. You know, that particular weekend that he was writing the election address. He pointed out how normalised this marginalisation, really, of women in football had become. I was sparked by that, you know, that ignited something in me, because I had no idea at that point that women played football. And I thought, hang on, I've fallen for this hook, line and sinker. Let's keep the fish analogy going. Then I come in and I talk to the players, as you read, Lucy, and I realised that Ed has really been a fire starter. And then Charlie, a fellow board member, and my husband, joined him in kind of campaigning that if they were re-elected, they would equalise the playing budgets. And when I got involved, so I talked to the players, you know, these women players had had pictures of men, obviously, on their walls as they were growing up, male footballers who they idolised. And they'd got so used to, you know, paying to play, even training with boys' teams and, you know, this kind of thing, and having to work harder, you know, travel further to find teams to play with, to get themselves to matches because no one was going to lay on a coach for them, even at semi-pro level, you know, not getting sponsored, accepting that the men had the sponsorship, accepting that the men had use of the canteen and not them, accepting that they weren't allowed to make a cup of tea in the same kitchen as the men. You know, all these amazing women that I spoke to who had taken these crumbs from the men's table because that was normal. And I, as Trev said, was coming in from a different background. Like I'd worked in therapy, I'd worked in fashion, I'd worked in the music industry, where this wasn't the case. And I'm thinking, what the hell? You were like my inspiration. How can you accept this? And what I say in the book is that we kind of accidentally radicalised a lot of our players just by paying them equally. Like they started to think, well, you know, this is possible. You know, these careers are possible. We're being treated fairly. And in fact, the truth is, you know, the paying them the same is a bit of a red herring. It was more, we did, but it was more the way we treated them. Like we used them for the marketing, we told their stories. Because, I mean, when you're looking after players, you know, we're getting them fresh bed linen, we're making sure they've got nice flats to be in. I mean, we were on that level, you know. And they were very grateful, but it woke them up as well to their status, really, and that they had to stop.
And their worth.
Their
Their value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then getting them crowds that would chant to there, you know, putting them on the website with the same space as the men, making sure that we have on our handles at Lewes FC Women and at Lewes FC Men, so that we're not default male, so that it's not just naturally going to always be about the men, but the women have equal status. Things like that. So the players, they did wake up, and Jess King made us a song. You know, one of our strikers recorded a rap about it, you know, Raise Us Up, YouTube. Look it up, Raise Us Up by Jess King. Very good. Yeah, great.
It's such a brilliant example of culture change.
It
and
is.
Often when we're supporting leaders and organisations to change culture, the focus is on the behaviour, which is fantastic, and how we treat people and helping people feel valued and worth and have a clear contribution to a shared purpose, a reason to believe. But often it's the system that's letting down, the sustainability of those behaviours really permeating day-to-day experience. But this experience really is interesting because the system changed first in terms of that equality of pay alongside that the behavioural change as well. So the two, it's a great example for any leader who's wants to change culture and sustain culture change in their organisations, in their communities, because it has the example of the system and the values and the behaviours being led through together.
And that in turn brought financial reward in terms of sponsorship as well. You're getting sponsorships that no club at that level could dream of. And it's because, you know, like me saying I had an inkling of this story, it's because it had filtered down somewhere into the, you know, it had come through all the sort of men's football channels that actually this was happening at Lewes. But it was something companies wanted to be involved in. You know? You know, and that positive disruption is attractive to other companies and brings its own financial benefits.
I think it is. I think, like, you know, when we brought in Lyle & Scott, it was the first 6-figure deal for just as, you know, on women's football, and it was brilliant. But I mean, it took a couple of years for the sponsors to wake up, to come in. And I think what a lot of our sponsors and partners have done over the years is signify internally to their employees what they're about by associating with Lewes. It's something they're aspiring to do, and we are walking the talk. Right, so it's a nice kind of football is sort of rough and ready, isn't it? It's a nice, and you can come to a football match and you can watch it in action. So they can also bring employees along. They can, you know, we've certainly had a lot of fintech companies join us for that reason. You know, away days, you know, and we can have lots of fun. We could do chanting workshops for their employees. We can do training on the pitch for their employees, and you know, and certainly they've used our story, which I think is a really good thing to do. Use the narrative to publicise yourself internally, if not externally, about what your values are as a company. But yeah, you know, on the outside, I think it might have looked like fairly smooth sailing, but on the inside, it is an example of culture change. And that culture is still changing because Lewes is a small club. We did something radical and pioneering. We were playing massive clubs on the women's side. We were playing Manchester United, playing Liverpool, playing Crystal Palace. And we should never have been. You know, it was only through equality that we were doing that. Size-wise, you know, we're really punching above our weight. But I think that ultimately it's a massive change that we were trying to make. And it wasn't that it was all unanimous and all Lewes fans were like, yay, let's go for this. Let's promote the women. Let's, you know, really, you know, and there was a lot of what about the men? Again, it's a really good example for bigger companies and corporates thinking about it, of the kind of obstacles that you might face when you're doing something radical like this, who you might need to either placate or change the minds of a bit, or do workshops with, you know, to bring along and achieve that kind of unity. And actually, does it work within the bigger system? Because it's been very tough for us, you know, with the FA, and, you know, we've been campaigning for an equal FA Cup prize, you know, for ages. You know, there's lots of things that we do at Lewes that are difficult to do because, you know, if we want to progress, we have to get a certain grade of floodlight or this many turnstiles. And for a small club that doesn't have a big men's side, it's very difficult to do. So the system doesn't help us. So we're really pushing against something much bigger than us. And maybe the next stage for us is actually to emancipate the women's team and move forward in that direction. So, you know, there's always things you can do. And there's always new stories to tell.
New challenge.
New chapters and all the rest of it. Yeah, exactly.
From the FA's point of view, some of these things are so easy. I mean, the payment thing's ridiculous. I just don't understand that.
And we've actually got a calculator on Lewes FC's website, lewesfc.com, where you put your team in and you see whether you'd be better off or worse off with our system of distribution for the FA Cup prize fund. I think it's something like 92% of clubs, we're talking men's clubs as well, would be better off under our system. Yeah. So quite often, when you prioritise women, everybody benefits. And the FA Cup prize, believe it or not, is a very clear example of that. And what they did, the last thing they did was they raised the Women's FA Cup prize fund, but they raised the men's even more, so that the gap became even bigger. It's just so, it's laughable if it didn't mean so much, But this is the sort of system that we live in. I always think football's a really good little microcosm of patriarchy in general, and you can look at it and you can see very clearly how things work and how things happen or don't happen and who's in charge. Interesting, isn't it?
And I think this is why the book is so compelling, and football is compelling, because it is a metaphor and an experience of social change and political change. And the title of our episode today is Whose Book Is It Anyway?, which is the title that you both chose. We'd like to know, why did you choose that title when you thought about collaboration, and whose book is it anyway?
When you talk about collaboration, and when it's someone's story, you have to get across the authenticity of that story. Yet as a publisher, your commitment is to the book and to ensuring it's a success. I mean, it's a business at the end of the day. We have to make money. For it to be a success, there are certain things that we have to perhaps guide in, or maybe try to tease the best out of the story. That's where the collaboration thing comes in really, really carefully. At the end of the day, I do believe it's the author's book, because you're trying to make it the most genuine book that it can be. You've sold into this story, you believe in it, so get across in the best way possible and stay authentic to the author, because the last thing you want to do is for the author to feel it's not like they've lost the book. But at the end of the day, Karen has to feel confident that it's her story getting across.
And he's so good at this, right? Because, so I kind of, my book was like, blur, that was all my chapters. And I remember, Trev, there's one chapter where I'm doing a suffragette flash mob, in the street, and we're going to march to Lewes FC saying D's not words, and, support the women's team. And I don't know how I'd written it, but anyway, Trev said, maybe you could introduce this as in the present tense, so you bring us directly into the scene, like it's chilly, I'm standing outside WA Smith in the high street, whatever, and these women are sort of edging towards me and they're starting to dance, that kind of thing. That brings it more directly to the reader. And I thought, that's a great idea. I was so grateful for all of the suggestions, because I suppose you feel a bit alone, when you're writing a book, you feel a bit, especially when it's non-fiction and it's your story. Yeah. And it was just so great to have someone who's actually read it, make little tweaks here and there. And I don't think there was one that I didn't think was great. Because in terms of collaboration, right, so I'm starting off, first-time author, never written a book, never had a publisher. I know that he's got loads of expertise. And so I'm thinking, this isn't my world. This is a new culture. So I've got to... Actually, it's like when I first got into football, I really had to listen and, listen to people's stories and what they were saying about this culture, because it was new to me as well. I love, by the way, being in that situation. I find it so exciting.
That sense of vulnerability when you're telling your story, and part of a kind of collaborative process, particularly in publishing, for an author, is support. Yeah, not in a really huggy way. It's just people will want to listen to this, so you have to kind of cajole them into sort of ensuring that they have the belief in their story. That is a relationship and a collaboration that's very, very important between a publisher and an author.
And it sounds like there's something really important, because at the very beginning, Trevor, you talked about listening and how you listen and listen really well. But also you both have a love of learning, which has come across in our conversation today. You know, the curiosity, the love of learning, the really listening, and the belief that you believed in the story, and encouraging you, Karen, to believe in your story, and that it is a story to be enjoyed, to be read, to be inspired by.
He did do that. I remember an email saying, you've got to believe in yourself, something like that. But do you know what I'm remembering? So there's this part in the book where I mention International Crow and Raven Appreciation Day. Right, who'd have thunk it? And the reason I do this is because the nickname of Lewes Football Club is the Rooks.
Yes.
And I found out, I created a writing competition called the Rooker Prize for the club. I was looking up for something relevant to make it relevant to announce the winner of the prize. And I found out, blow me, that there's an International Crow and Raven Appreciation Day. So I thought, well, we'll announce the winner of the Rooker Prize that day. The Rooks, up the Rooks, all that. Anyway, I had this in the book. And one of Trev's notes, as he was reading it, was in a funny way, he wrote, isn't that a bit exclusive of other corvids, Yeah. I thought, oh my God, this guy's so on my wavelength. It's so silly. But I thought, yeah, right.
It's equity ornithology, really, isn't it?
Yes.
Also, I think there's perhaps a little bit more, there's something about respecting someone's viewpoint, and that's when you listen. You've got to respect the standpoint of the author, where are they coming from, and equally coming back, there's probably that respect from the publisher. What pressures are on them. So the pressure for the author is to get their story across and for people to want it. The pressure for a publisher is a bit more commercial and about markets. When you have that between an author and publisher, it usually ends up in the best book.
It's a real partnership, isn't it? And before we started our conversation, you did mention that you're collaborating on a new cover and that you're working on that together. How is that going?
So this is the hardback with its particular cover. And interestingly, I wanted to call it Bitch Invasion. It's called Pitch Invasion. But Trevor's advice and the advice of his sales team was, don't call it Bitch Invasion. We'll call it Pitch Invasion because Amazon, they don't like the word bitch. So this is advice I would never have known,
Sure.
So this is good. But you can see how we collaborated. We turned the P into a lipsticked B. So although it's called Pitch Invasion, it's also, which is, I think, a major example of collaboration. Come on.
Absolutely.
If we were in that sort of podcast, I'd go, let's all clap.
Yes.
So that's
We are in
amazing
that sort of
collaboration.
podcast.
Well, let's do it. Bitch Invasion. But what we're thinking is we've got a chance with the paperback to redirect it, because it hasn't had the take-up that we hoped from women who don't like football. And that could be because it looks too football-y, and maybe the subtitle is too football-y. It actually says the word football. So maybe we need to change the cover. So we kind of agreed that for the paperback. And then I went in to see Trev and his amazing colleagues, Karen and Charlotte, who do publicity and press for Octopus Books. They had these different covers ready to look at to make it more sort of appealing to a woman's market. So if you imagine a book, a sort of chick lit book, the covers were kind of like that. And they weren't pink, like we're not saying that, but it was much more like you might pick up if you're looking for a sort of female-friendly book. I don't know how, he knows better how to describe it. But
it's sort of more the kind of, what we were going for is perhaps a bit more of an accessible feminism look to it with the paperback, right?
Yeah.
And as you said, it's perhaps a little bit too
punky. A bit punky, do you think?
Yeah, we like that disruptive feel to it.
We like that, though, don't we? See, I think we're on the same page, but we're trying to get there, because we're also thinking about changing subtitle, and we're not sure.
Changing the colour.
Yeah, the colour is a big thing. But you always get this with paperbacks. It gives you a chance to actually move towards perhaps a different segment of the market. And actually, in terms of collaboration, the cover is one of the hardest things.
Oh, I was going to ask you, what has been the hardest?
It's our longest meeting we have each week. Honestly, it takes about an hour and a half to go through all the covers, and we structure it so that I may present a cover or a briefing for a cover, not even the cover. Then we go through UK sales, and then international sales will have, and then publicity will have a say, and then designer may come back. It takes ages, and cover is very subjective, isn't it?
So subjective.
And it's
so
representing
subjective.
so much.
Yeah.
I mean,
Isn't
yeah.
it? It's representing everything. It is that invitation. It's that first experience.
Yeah.
It's that, are you going to get drawn in or are you not? So it matters.
But do you know what? The thing about collaboration is, so one of the first things that I remember saying to Trev when I met him with my agent Nick, to market this book, I need to think of it as a product and not me. So I can't think of that as representing me or get funny about it like that. I need to think of it as like I used to think about the football club, like a product that I'm marketing. I have to go with what other people think here, because it's so easy, isn't it, if something like this to think, oh, that doesn't represent me, but that's just,
And that's quite
crazy
rare
talk.
in collaboration. And it's when, in our experience, when we get to that collaborative edge, especially something that is so personal, that you've shared your story, it's on paper, and it's for a cause. It's not just for the sake of sharing your story, it's for raising women's voices all over the world, as I can experience it. That's what I've taken from it. There's a real opportunity here. And that can be really rare when there's something so meaningful and so personal that becomes part of a collaboration, to have that generosity of spirit to loosen that association or ownership of that.
Yeah, do you know what I think though? I think to myself, and this is going to sound really terrible, but it's a freeing thing to think. I think I could always do it again. I could always write another book, get it right next time. It's, the only thing I wouldn't think that about is childbirth. But anything else, I would think, well, I'll have another go if it goes wrong. At the end of the day, it is really important to me. Don't get me wrong, but that's how I have to get into that frame of mind.
It's a mindset, isn't it, that you've got into, and it's one that we talk about and encourage leaders sometimes to get out of their own way. That's what they have to do, and that's what you've done. And the mindset of seeing it as a product which you're passionate about, but you've got a little bit of detachment from as well.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see this new cover, aren't you?
Oh, I am too. I think we both are.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Yeah. No, it'll be good. It'll be good, and it'll give it a whole new market to enter into, I think.
Yeah.
Or for
the book. See, the problem with this book is it doesn't fit in a box. And what we realised as well is that the tags on the book weren't right. They put it into a football. So if you go into Waterstones, that it's tagged to put it on a football shelf with football biographies. And what I'm thinking is an average football fan, probably a bloke, goes to the football shelves, sees that book and thinks, oh, that's right up my street, bitch invasion, feminists on a football club board. No, not really. I want to get it into gender studies and women's sections and sort of
culture change,
that sort of thing. Yeah, whatever they are, get it into there as well. So although the cover's important, I think also where we put it is also important. So yeah, it's exciting to see it maybe take a slightly different direction.
And what else have you learned about collaborating and some of the challenges as well? You mentioned support earlier, supporting each other with the belief. But what have been some of the biggest challenges in your partnership?
I genuinely don't think there were many
Well,
challenges.
that's great.
So my challenge within myself was how, because I'm an expert on my own story, maybe, but I'm not an expert on publishing or commercial and stuff like that. But I have done some media and marketing and things like that. So it's how assertive to be sometimes and how assertive not to be. To be honest, I didn't know how to balance my responses sometimes. To should I don't want to sound all directy, and at the same time, and also, but I don't know what I'm doing, so. Trusting the process, you'd call it, really, wouldn't you? I'm not sure if I'm being too much. I'm not sure if I'm not being enough. It's just finding that balance in new relationships. And I also want the book to sell, so we're aligned. We've got the same mission. What is my role within that? How far can I push my agenda? That's my challenge. It would probably be my challenge in a lot of situations, and it's my challenge with Trev and the publishing company.
What's interesting about it from the collaboration point of view is that you were paying attention to that and noticing it. And I think that's a great invitation to listeners and viewers when we're thinking about collaboration and finding what we call that collaborative edge, where more is possible together than alone. It is about the sum of the parts.
Yes.
Often we don't always pay attention to our part in that as mindfully as you've just described. Do I speak up? Do I not? Do I contribute here? Do I hold back? How far do I push this to get my point, my view heard and accepted? Or actually, is it one that we can have some looseness around and we can create something different and something bigger? And we don't often have that attention to it.
Because I've been a therapist, in the past, I'm always paying attention to my own process and staying interested in myself. And I think that's so important for me. It's really important for me as a person. I can't predict it. I've been in board meetings at Lewes SC, for example, where I've said something that I think is relatively inane and someone's gone and resigned the next day because of it. So, or I've said something that I think is quite, maybe a bit too pushy, and it's gone down like fine, no biggie. So it's sometimes hard, isn't it, to predict how assertive you should be. And I always find that if I have a slight mission, and I'll be honest, so when I was in the last meeting with Trev, and his two colleagues are both female and they're a bit younger than me. And I always think, as a woman, what example am I setting if I don't say what I think? So I have that extra little bit of motivation sometimes.
Yes.
I have that too, which was just really great for me.
Really
because
great.
It
And for them, I'm imagining.
Yeah.
I don't know. You never know, do you, how things go down. But what I do know is when I say my piece, it also can give someone else permission to say their piece. And then you find out something you didn't know. And when you're talking about collaborative edge, if they kind of meet each other, those two edges, then you can fly sometimes. It really is the sum is whatever they say greater than the individuals. So you realise you're flying because you've both been honest and said your bit,
Wonderful. And as we come to the close of our conversation, what three things between you and or extra to the three would you encourage listeners and leaders to pay attention to find their collaborative edge?
I think for me, with the collaboration, is respect. Respect where the other person's coming from, what are their motives, what are they doing. Listen, because you need to. You can't respond unless you listen properly and enjoy, because you will find something in that person that will, oh, that's interesting, and it will make the process a whole lot more enjoyable. If you think collaboration is always conflict resolving, then you're doing it wrong. It's got to be enjoyable.
Listen,
I love that.
respect, and have fun, enjoy. Really lovely.
100%. I think also when you get to a certain age, you just think, well, what am I doing if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing? So it has to be, something that's going to make you want to get up in the morning and go, and enjoy your life. So I very much agree with Trev on that. The one thing I would add, if you are aware of your own reactions as you're talking to someone or deciding something with someone, don't be scared of feeling them. Don't always say them. That's not always appropriate. Note to self. But, be aware of them, because then you can go away and think about it and come back with that extra value, actually, and say it in a way that is respectful and acknowledges the other person. It really is about listening to yourself and not necessarily putting yourself forward all the time. Something like that.
Paying attention to that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for our
thank you.
conversation.
Thank you. It's been very
Thank
enjoyable.
you.
Yeah.
Really lovely.
It's been enlightening. Thank you.
Has it? Oh, good.
I think so, yeah.
It's so lovely. And knowing how very busy you are, Trev, and how busy you are with your mission, thank you so much for taking the time to
It's quite
talk
nice
with us
going
today.
back over the processes
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
just thinking back on it, actually, because you don't get often time to reflect on these things, because there's always the next thing. So it's actually really, lovely.
Yeah.
Well, we often hear that from guests, that just preparing for the conversation and reflecting on the journey that they've been on together and are on together is in and of itself really helpful. Thank you, Karen and Trev, for being in conversation with us today. We'll be sharing your LinkedIn details in the show notes for this episode so people can follow, connect and collaborate with you. Thank you to you, the audience, for being alongside us. There's also a link to our website, collaborationequation.com, to discover more about us and how we can help you to find your collaborative edge. We look forward to connecting with you. Please do share and subscribe to this podcast, Finding Your Collaborative Edge, living and leading with curiosity, care and courage. A huge thank you to Brown Bear Studios for recording and the production of our show, and to Schmogus Media and Penny Writing for the marketing of it. And a huge thank you to you, Lucy, for your partnership and collaboration. Thank you.